That's how we do it. So we're
Cool.
recording. So I'll just say a quick hello, just
Please.
to kind of set the scene. So my name's Joanne. I'm an addict, and my clean date is the 27th of February, 2010. And you are watching a conversation between myself and the amazing Todd Walker, who's going to introduce himself shortly, as a part of the Passenger Recovery If You Can See It, You Can Be It series. Um, I think Todd is going to very kindly share his experience, strength, and hope with us around his recovery in the music industry for a time, and then we're just going to have a chat and see what happens. So, Todd, I'll hand it over to you. Whatever you'd like to share today, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
I love it. Thanks, Joanne. I love you, by the way.
I love you.
And I do appreciate you being letting me be of service, and Chris for letting me be of service. Because it's really what it's all about. And disregard any like lack of eye contact. For some reason, I was thinking today too, like I'm big on eye contact, and I always have been big on eye contact, like when I see you personally. But for some reason, whenever I share my story, or if I share in AA meetings, or like meetings in general, I find that I don't do the eye contact. And I don't know if that's a way for me to sort of like not look at you, because when I first came into these rooms, I I really almost like judged my way out of them. I looked at all the people, and I looked at like, that person is, I'm not as bad as that person, or that
Their
person
shoes are
definitely
terrible.
needs this. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And I almost sort of like,
completely.
compared myself out of this place. And then an old timer in AA said, well, he said two things. I'll never forget this dude, and I've never seen him again. I saw him on one meeting, but he said two things. He said, listen, kid, there's two kinds of business: your business and none of your fucking business. I loved that. And
I
then
love
the other
that.
thing he said was, comparison is the thief of joy. And I work now, obviously we know each other from, the music industry and things like this. And we work with a lot of like egos. We work with a lot
Mm-hmm.
of egos and a lot of comparison and a lot of like, I mean, it's really sort of a bunch of egomaniacs with insecurity problems, which I identify with, and I also identify with like, I'm not that much, but I'm all I think about, you know. I grew up like that, I grew up like not thinking that I was really that much. My mother died when I was really young, at 7. And I grew up with two younger brothers, and a father who was really, really strict, and is also an alcoholic and is now sober. Thank God. I don't have much of a relationship with him today, but we had a very, very integral and tight relationship growing up. I was in and out of a lot of different families after my mother passed. My dad got remarried 3 times. I was in and out of a lot of different step families. And, I grew up like really privileged, even though like my dad wasn't really that well off, which I realize now. He ended up marrying these rich women, and and so I kind of was made to feel like, okay, yeah, okay, you 3 Walker boys, you can move into our nice houses and things like this, but don't be disruptive, like you should be very thankful that I married your father and have allowed you to sort of come and live in my home. I never ever felt my whole life that I was in my home, ever.
Mm.
And my dad was a serious, was a serious alcoholic. I look at alcoholism as just an is, but he was a very active alcoholic and drinker. And a lot of the marriages were fairly short, but the first few years were all like dinner parties and Cape Cods and Hyannisport and all these like nice places where there was all these dinner parties, and we had to dress up a certain way and be a certain way and all this kind of stuff. And I realize now that like my brothers and I never really got to like, deal with the loss of a mother, or like deal with going
Yeah.
into a new house. It was just like, yo, this is what you have to do, and and it was just really rough, you know. I do remember, and I say this often when I share my story, is I do remember, and I always have remembered, and it's always sort of like a Pavlov thing with me, with like you know, the ice hitting the glass, you know, the sound of ice hitting a glass, and it happened every single night for me as a child. And when that ice hit the glass, and my dad drank, you know, vodka and caffeine-free Diet Coke. That was like his
Oh
drink,
wow.
you know. It was like his thing. It was so weird, you know. But
Wow.
that's what he would drink. And when he would have that one glass of when he started drinking, then there was like a connectivity that me and my brothers sort of shared with my dad. Because when it wasn't like that, it was like you're this and you're this and you're not doing this, and it was always sort of like striving to just get the that acceptance, you know. And even though I feel like my story is unbelievably unique, what I have learned, you know, over these years, is I'm just like everybody else, you know? And it's like my story is no better or no worse than someone else's story. And it doesn't mean that, you know, my alcoholism or the way that I sort of coped with that type of thing, um, is like no better or worse than someone else. You know what I mean? Like we're all dealing with this kind of shit.
Mm.
But back then, I feel like I was the only one, you know? And we struggled. I was like a little punk kid, you know? I was a little punk kid that got really into like, you know, skateboarding, which my dad hated. I just rebelled, you know what I mean? Like I was really into skateboarding, and I ended up hanging out with this dude Ben that had like a quarter pipe in his backyard and a trampoline and all this kind of stuff. And he was really into like, you know, the Bones Brigade, like Steve Caballero and Tony Hawk and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool. And we used to watch videos, and and it was kind of the first time that like, you know, he was like way into music, you know, so he introduced me to like, you know, like Suicidal Tendencies and Danzig and all this kind of
Wow.
stuff. And I was like, oh man, like, ah, this is so angry. And it was weird too, because it was such a soundtrack of like just how I was feeling inside, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, I definitely acted out. And I was one of these kids in school that, you know, never got good grades, but for some reason all these teachers like and I look back at like all the report cards, you know, when you sort of like look back at all the junk that you have and what am I going to do all this stuff, and they always said like, yeah, he has so much potential, like there's something there with this kid. And that made me feel like validated, you know. There was always like the art teacher, Mr. P, you know, who I will never ever forget, or you know, Mr. Benovitz. And you know, there was a couple of teachers throughout my early years that were like, yo dude, you don't have to be like such a fuck up, you know. But I was in that zone. I was like, whatever, I want to skateboard, I want to like do graffiti, I want to like just kind of act out, you know. And I would leave to school, you know, with like a collared shirt and you know, nice stuff. And I remember in my bag I would always have like, you know, like a flannel and something ripped, or like ripped like, you know, like cargo pants, and you know, like anarchy signs all over his bag, and like
Amazing.
rat bones and all that kind of stuff. I was just one of these punk kids. And but I loved it, you know. And then and that's like kind of like when the drinking started, you know, like 13, 14. And you know, that first time in the summertime when you're out with friends, and you know, you sneak all this booze out and go to the golf course or something, and everyone starts drinking. And yeah, I just remember drinking for the first time, and it was disgusting. I remember it was so disgusting. I was like, God, these old people are drinking this shit. This is like gas. This is like piss gas, disgusting. But then like that feeling came over, you know? And that feeling of just like relief. And it wasn't even like relief. It was sort of like I felt like it was kind of a spiritual experience, because it was like, oh yeah, how like now I can look through things from a different lens, you know.
Yeah.
Like I can look through things from a different lens, and like all this stuff with like skating and music and all this kind of stuff all of a sudden like looked okay, you know. And the people that I was down with and stuff, they were like, doing things that were different and rebellious and forward thinking. And it just made me feel like free from this kind of, box of like, strict um, adherence to certain rules that I just always felt were off and not right. Feel better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just feel
It's
like,
so, yeah, it's so
right?
interesting because, the way that you're talking about music is exactly my experience as well. Like, growing up in literally middle of nowhere in Farmsville in Canada, and finding music and finding, I was really lucky in that I think I've told you this story, but, I've mentioned it when I've had my interview with Chris as well, like driving across America when I was a kid, my parents had such a good soundtrack. I heard so much different kind of music, and it held me when I just didn't understand what was going on in the world. And then, I found punk too, and it changed my life. Just
Yeah.
literally everything changed. It was like, I was like, oh my God, this is where I was supposed to, these are my people. This is the secret I've been waiting to get into my life, so that I can then have the capacity to know I'm not alone. I felt so alone. I started reading fanzines, and suddenly my life changed. It just opened. Bands like
Yeah.
Nirvana, obviously really important. The Riot Girl scene changed my life. But also bands, like Nine Inch Nails, and a lot of bands that were coming out of America, a lot of American music, and Kraftwerk as well. All these bands that were just doing something completely different. And
Yeah.
yeah, when I got into using as well, it's like all of a sudden I felt connected to that. I was like, I'm now a part of this. I'm now a part of what I'm reading about, and it really changed things. It changed
Yeah.
things.
It felt like the thing with music, which really was and remains a big part of my spiritual experience. It was like one of the things that I wanted to be the like the leader of. I wanted to be the academic. I wanted to be the guy that knew that shit. So even in like the punk world too, with like, like Circle Jerks and Dead Milkmen and Dead Kennedys and,
Mm,
Agnostic Front and like, hearing Fugazi for the first time and
wow.
then sneaking into shows and stuff, I like there was a place in Boston called The Channel, which was like the hardcore club in Boston. And I think it was 18 plus, but I remember being 14, 15, and me and Ben Upton, or me and whatever, my bro, like would sneak into these places and like get in. And like I didn't
Wow.
hit puberty until I was like a junior, senior in high school. So I was like a little freaking mighty Mike. But the thing that was funny about me is I always hung out with the older crew. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
always hanging out with like the older skinheads and the older punks and like the older skaters and stuff like that. And that made me feel so good about myself. I felt like, holy shit, I can be a 14-year-old kid, hang out with the 16, 17-year-olds that are like stealing shit, sneaking into
Yeah.
clubs and doing drugs and stuff. And then like take the tea home, and quickly like change my clothes before I would get into the house and stuff like that. And, well, how was your day? And I was like, dude, you have no idea like what just went down. You know what I mean? Like,
It
I
was
was
great.
like
I did
that
my
guy.
homework at school.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, I was just a punk kid trying to sort of figure out adolescence.
Yeah.
And we got fucked up. Like I don't know. It was always part of the whole thing. And even though I knew a little about like, having an alcoholic dad and like what came with that, like it just never registered. I wasn't ready to like receive or really like hear those type of things. And you know, and that music just really like evolved for me. And I had a babysitter, this guy Nils or Niels or whatever, and he was like this old 70s rocker dude, and he like introduced me to
Wicked.
like like the Clash and Van
Wicked.
Halen and
Yeah.
like I don't know, even
Black
like
Sabbath.
you know
Surely Black Sabbath.
Black Sabbath, of course,
Yes.
and he was like a punk guy too, like Operation Ivy, and
Wicked.
all this kind of stuff, and that also led into other stuff. You know what I mean? Like the Clash sort of helped introduce me to like Lee Perry, and I'm smoking tons of weed and stuff, and that and like King Tubby and Lee Perry and sort of like the Adrian Sherwood, and kind of introducing me to like that dub punk. Bad Brains was a huge part of my childhood. Like Eye Against Eye
Yeah.
was like a soundtrack of a moment. You know what I mean? I can hear that record now and just literally be exactly in that space once again. You know what I mean? Do you have
Wow.
records like
That's so
that?
powerful. Yeah, totally. Totally. And
Yeah,
you can, so much so that you can even smell what you were smelling when you used to listen to that music.
totally,
You know, like, and you
totally.
just think I can even remember like what I ate an hour ago from when I first heard that song. Like one that does it for me is like Smashing Pumpkins' Siamese Dream album. There's
Oh,
something about that album that just I'm literally transported back to being 13, and I can even look down and see what I was wearing at that time. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
it's so transformational, you know. And you know, if I listen to like things from when I was a kid, like Nights in White Satin, that song just
forget
takes me
it.
into another realm, and you just think like, wow, this is like some deep, deep, deep stuff.
You
You
know,
know,
one thing
it's
that was
beyond.
super cool in high school is my uncle, who I'll get to too, you know, at the end, because he's part of my like my recovery journey. His best friend was Bruce Pavitt that started Sub Pop, and I got on
Wow.
the 7 inch like mailing list, and I
Oh
remember
my
I would
gosh.
get these 7 inches, the early 7 inches. Bleach came, and like Codeine and Tad, and you know,
Wow.
Screaming Trees and all that kind of like Seattle shit started coming in like 7 inches and stuff. And yeah, and I remember like just driving around too. I mean, Nirvana was a big deal too, like in high school, and you know, yeah, I it was like these game changers, but there was always this soundtrack, and it was, even though alcohol is such a great kind of like relief and space that I just nurtured so hard. You know, music was kind of like that too. Like it was fucking mine. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it was
Yes,
all
like your
mine.
breath,
And
like your blood, it's yours. It belongs to you. It belongs to
totally,
you.
yeah.
Yeah. That's why I work in
And I
music.
just hung out with
That's
all
why
the
I work in this
fucking,
business.
yeah. I mean, I just hung out with
Yeah.
all the weirdos. I never thought that it would work in this business, but I guess just because who knows how the music business even like works, or how you even get
Exactly.
into it. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
so bizarre. Like
100%.
even the kids
It
nowadays
is.
that are like, I got a degree in, you know, music business from, you know, I'm like, wow,
Congratulations.
okay.
You
Yeah,
paid for that. It's going to amount to zero. It's not, you know, yeah,
totally.
yeah.
Yeah. But there was always booze, you know, and I also really sort of like reveled and celebrated my authority in the party, you know? Like I'm the guy. Like I was the dude that was like ready to get fucked up, knew how to like get buyers and stuff, and you know, get booze, and I knew where to get the weed, and which turned into the, you know, the acid or the mushrooms or whatever. I just felt cool that I could be the dude, because I had older friends that, you know, that I just knew how to like, I was just a hustler. Like I
Yeah.
was just like learning the hustle of life. But you know, even though I grew up feeling less than, and I felt like a piece of shit, I felt stupid, I felt like a fat kid, you know, I felt all these really gnarly things. Um, you know, through all the sort of experiences, you know, through that time, I once I was away from that, I knew that wasn't true. You know what I mean? Like I had crew that was like crew, you know, that I still know
Yeah.
today, that are still my friends today. And I never felt like, even though I said like, you know, I'm not that much, but I'm all I think about, even though I have like self-esteem issues and insecurity issues and all that kind of stuff, like I never felt like I was stupid or fat or like dumb or lazy and stuff. But I feel like, but the truth is like, that's kind of how it looked like on the outside. You know what I mean? Like that is kind of how it looked like on the outside. Like I set a bar that was like, Todd Walker, whatever. You know what I mean? And that carried on into college. You know, I went out to, you know, I started after like the, you know, my punk and my dub and my ska kind of thing, that kind of turned into like some hippie shit, you know. I started getting into the Dead and getting into like Allman Brothers and, you know, all the hippie stuff. And I got kicked out of college, this real whatever school out in Durango, Colorado, which I loved. I got kicked out after one semester because I never went to any classes. And I remember this too, and this is, and I bring this up in my shares often, is when I got kicked out of school, I had come home for Christmas. I had saved up a bunch of money. I bought a car, which is a piece of shit, like old, like
Hmm.
Subaru, like, you know, station wagon, you know, I don't know, for like $1,000 or $1,500 or something. had two homies, drove out to Colorado, found out that I was kicked out of school. And I was like, whoa, what am I going to do? I called my dad. I was like, Dad, I just got kicked out of school. I don't know what to do. And he was like, well, you should probably like get a job and figure that out. And I was like, what the hell? Like I had everything was like, it's like that one moment of, one of those 10 major like transitions or major junctures in life. And my dad wrote me a check for $1,000 for like first, last, and deposit. And that's like the last I ever like took from people, It was the last like help that I feel like I like asked for, you know what I mean? Like there was something that was really this sense of pride for me that I was like, okay, well, fuck it, I'm gonna do life, like I'm gonna figure this whole thing out, and I did, I like went on tour with the Dead, and for 6 or 7 months, and I loved it. I was selling burritos and Sam Smith beers and stuff on the Dead lot, and it was like, and still like drinking and getting fucked up and doing lots of drugs, but it was so there was such a sense of community around that,
Yeah.
that I was like, oh wow, I really feel a, and that really felt good, feeling like you were like a part of something that was bigger than you.
Yeah. Yeah. So how old would you have been at that time, Todd? And how did you get that job? Did it just happen
It
to
was
be
like
that you knew?
18, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like 18,
Yeah.
19 or something like that. It was like right off the bat.
Wow. So your first job was on tour, basically.
Well, first job on tour, but I was like hustling. I was working at the pizza
Yeah.
shop. I was delivering pizzas. I started at Domino's. I was a killer delivery driver. I had this assistant
Nice.
manager that like loved me, and I was just awesome at like delivering pizzas. And then I like started making pizzas. I could slap out pizzas, killer. Like I was awesome. And I
Sick.
loved it. And then I was working like landscaping and digging shit, and you just do stuff. I had like three
Yeah,
or
you
four
do.
jobs and just trying to figure it out. But like always going to music and going to see stuff, and sneaking into like the Telluride Bluegrass Festival, and seeing like David Grisman and Sam Bush and Bela Fleck and all that kind of stuff. It was really an instrumental part of like this story, and I was out there on my own, and the fact that I was figuring that out, it was like, yo, I can do life, like this is going to be easy. But I do know now that like I never actually like dealt with shit, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
never really dealt with that like gnarliness. I had so much resentment. Fuck my family, fuck my dead mommy, fuck all this shit. I still had that
Hmm.
like punk rock kind of mentality that I just didn't really nobody really got me. You know what I mean? Nobody really cares about Todd. Nobody really got me. The thing that I have some shame over, which I am working on now, is like, even with like the loss of a parent at a really young age, I'm it's a contradiction, and I used it really hypocritically. My parent that I lost, I used as a protector when making decisions that may not have been right. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
drinking too much, doing too many drugs, going out, we used to eat acid and go ice climbing and stuff. I was in like some weird fires and things like this. Like I had a lot of shit that happened to me as a child, but like I had this like dead parent that was kind of looking out for me. But then the hypocrisy of it is it was also it gave me a reason to like drink too. Like, oh, my mommy died, like
Yeah.
whatever, like I can drink over it. So I kind of
The
like
thing,
used
whatever
these
that thing was. Yeah.
emotions to
Yeah.
like serve whatever I needed, you know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
It wasn't like the truth. I spent a lot of time in my truth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get it. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because you hear that in the rooms a lot as well. Like, again, from my own experience, and I can share this because it's mine. It's like, I had my thing. Well, I can drink because, or I can use because I was bullied really badly at school. Like, I was bullied like horrifically at school.
No.
So I can use, I'm going to use on that. And I had, quite a challenging childhood, and I'll use on that. My family, like, it was everyone else was the problem but me, basically. And it wasn't until I came into recovery that I was the common denominator in all of those things.
So those are the reasons to use and to drink, but those are also the reasons that made you such a motherfucker. Like you
Yeah.
could pull this off. You know
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I'm saying?
absolutely. You were like, "I this is like my armor. This is my armor." Yeah.
Yeah, and it's isn't it funny, like, coming to terms with that because it's so, like, profoundly, distinctly, like, true and real, but the 2 of them like, are total hypocrisies because they're battling themselves, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, out in Colorado, 5 years, doing lots of really great things, having unbelievable experiences, nurturing wonderful relationships and really great camaraderie and friends and, selling weed, like, it was just all part of the hustle, you know? And I loved it, I loved it. But then after 5 years, I was like, "Oh, man, I wonder if anyone's gonna do anything." I had to get knee surgery, so I came home and, I had a girlfriend at the time that I was really into, but that was sort of like running its course. And I remember getting home. I remember my dad. It was right back. I had to move in with him, and he was like in another relationship and another dysfunctional family situation. And I remember having to be there, and now I had to like fall in line again,
Mm.
and I was like, "Oh my god, I really gotta fall in line again here." And I did, I did. I got a job at like Brigham and Women's Hospital. I was working on this program and wearing like a coat and tie to this job. And my dad was like, "Oh, I'm so proud of him," even though it was like the
Ugh.
worst. And yeah, and then I moved downtown with my friend Siobhan, and we had this amazing like hang and great relationship. And I actually started getting into like the like wine business, which again, like it's on the nostril over here. But I was going to be like a highfalutin alcoholic. I was going to
All
learn
right.
about
Okay.
different wines. I was working at this really great like, this wine cellar and all this kind of thing. And whatever. I just had a bunch of different jobs, but all while like going to raves. And so now I'm getting into like electronic music. So now I'm going out and seeing like Orbital and the Orb and like
Amazing.
Aphex Twin and doing lots of like,
Oh, yes.
ecstasy and like all that kind of stuff. And now I'm selling it and, whatever. I'm just, it's my drugs and booze are just always this incorporative part. And now people are getting sober. Like my younger brothers are starting to get sober. And I was like, what a bunch of losers. I can't believe this,
Yeah.
um and then yeah, I just had all this other kind of stuff happen. And then I remember my dad got sober, and in the program, as like it's such a profound experience. um Everything changes. So all of a sudden my dad was like, "I love you and I'm so sorry for being a shitty dad," and all this like weird, gnarly, like uncomfortable stuff where I was like, "Yo, you were this guy before, like I'm not down with this whole thing." And I looked at everyone that was getting sober in my life because people were also dying and stuff, and there was all that kind of stuff. But I always looked at it as like, you're a loser, like you lost this wonderful battle with this unbelievably important mistress that I will never ever let go of. So
Yeah.
I also started to, now I'm controlling my drinking and stuff. And so I'm not drinking during the week. I'm only like Friday to Sunday or Thursday to Fridays or when I have to go out or all these kind of things. And I'm
Hmm.
like controlling and stuff, but I'm still like party guy. I'm still, positive guy. Found a woman, got married, out of my league. She's fucking incredible. Have these 2 kids. Um, and I started booking these bands, and that's how I got into the music business. I mean, I basically got in from like the ground up. I had friends that were just like in bands. I was going out to see a lot of shows. My wife had a friend that was like promoting a lot of like jam bands in Boston, and he and I started kind of hanging out. Um and I had just these like friends that were in bands, and then they were getting bigger, this band called Lettuce, and which became this band called Soul Live. And and um and um and they were like, "Well, yeah, Walker's gonna book us." And I was like, "What?" And they were like, "Yeah, dude,
Oh.
see if you can pull off a show in New York or or Vermont or something." And so I was calling like the wetlands in New York and like doing shows there and just being like, "Do you want to book this band and stuff?" And then I started working with this guy at this company called Gamelon, and it was just all hustle. That's also while I was like also selling weed, also selling whatever drugs. I was also a bartender. I was also this. I had 1,000 different jobs. I was making $6 an hour versus like 50% of what I was bringing in, and they were all like 250, $500 gigs. Like if I got a $500 gig back then, and people were like, "Nice job, dude. That's amazing." And and that's how it started. And then I signed this reggae band, John Brown's Body, which I freaking love, and this great jazz band out of Seattle called the Living Daylights, and this dude from Australia, Dr. Didge, and I just had a cool little like weird roster, and then got a call from this dude named Scott, had a company called IMN, because my buddy was a tour manager on a tour called Africa Fest, which was a tour with like Taj Mahal and Baba Mal, and like it was like a Mali meets Memphis type of tour. And he said, "Yo, if you're ever looking for an agent one day, call this kid Todd. He's like booking all these like little bands and stuff and in Boston." And then like some real gnarly shit happened. And I was in this really dark place, and I got a call from this dude, and he was like, "Hey, do you want a job?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." And it was up in Gloucester, which is like north of Boston. And International Music Network is this incredible company where it was all about like, world music and jazz. And so he's booking like Herbie Hancock and Wayne Shorter and Brad Meldau and Chucho Valdez and Dave Holland and all the world music, Buena Vista Social Club, and the Africans, Youssou
Wow.
N'Dour, Baba Mal, Habib Keita, Umu Sangare, all the big Brazilians, Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil and Marisa Monch. And the thing that was so incredible about IMN is it was this really wonderful education in like the cultural importance of music. Like, because when you look at music from a lot of different cultures, you look at like an artist like Manu Chao in Spain or something like
Mm,
this. These artists are so essential. It was like our Rage Against the Machine kind of thing, and all the different
totally.
like their music like extends past just a show. Like it's a cultural voice
Move.
to
Yeah, it's a
something that needs
movement.
to
It's a
change.
movement.
Yeah, and I really identified with that. I
Hmm.
just really identified with that kind of thing. But I love the music business because like I could party, I could go to shows, I could get fucked up, I could meet all these people, I could travel.
Yeah.
Now I'm like married, and I bought a house and had kids, and that little punk kid was now like doing some shit. And so everyone was like, Walker is like married and bought a house like and has kids. Like I would have never guessed. Like that was the punk kid that was just trying to like ollie stairs at the high school and stuff. And that was really cool. And it was really cool, like exceeding people's expectations. And it was like a really early moment where I kind of started realizing you know, like all this outside validation for this internal desire I just always needed and wanted. And it was amazing. And then like that was unbelievable. And then I went to a company called the Windish Agency. This dude Tom
Hmm.
Windish, who's a homie, and I was there from like 2012 to 2017, which was like this really unbelievable time in the business. And I was working with some people that I to this day have so much admiration and respect for. And um and then that became a place called Paradigm, which was rough for me because it was really corporate, and it was really kind of structured in a way that just didn't really kind of like celebrate the shit that I was really into. You start becoming a human being, it becomes a human doing, and you're only kind of like celebrated as much as like the money that you're bringing in. And
Yeah.
it was
It
just
becomes
it
less
was
about
just
the music, right? It becomes more about the business than the music.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And there was a turning point at Windish, like in terms of my drinking and stuff like that. There was a turning point where like I um I was booking like Sinead O'Connor, Cassandra Wilson, Shuggy Otis, Bobby Womack. And if you know these artists, they're some of the most incredible artists in all of the world, but they're really challenging artists to deal with. And some shit went down there. And I remember my drinking changed. This is like 2000, maybe 16 or something like that. And now it all of a sudden was just overwhelming. And now I'm just drinking to cope. And I'm just like doing drugs just to cope and just to deal and just get through. And like I learned in AA that like it's not how much you drink, but it's like what happens to you when you do drink. And
Yep.
what happened to me when I do drink, it really like changed. And then I started my own company. My marriage is like dangling. My kids hate me. I start my own company in like January of 2020. My drinking in 2019 was just really fucked up. It was a really, really dark year for me. Started a new company. Who's coming with me? Everyone's stoked. And then COVID hit in March. And I'm so hollowed out, like alcohol and drugs, mostly alcohol, really rotted me from the inside out. I'm gaining insane amounts of weight. It's just disgusting. My wife's going to leave me. My kids just want nothing to do with me. I turned into everything I promised myself I wouldn't turn into. And then I just wanted to fucking die. I literally just wanted to die. And I'm too much of a pussy to blow my head off, but I had two different options. I got myself into this place where I had two options. It was either like I'm going to die and not be here anymore. And as gnarly as that sounds, that was my truth. That was like
Yep.
the truth. It was my truth then. Or I was going to ask for help. And I called my Uncle John that put me on the Sub Pop list back in the day and stuff. I said, John, I need help. I'm an alcoholic. And he said, I've been waiting for this call for 15 years.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And that's the beauty of recovery, right? It's like we keep what we have by giving, but it's attraction rather than promotion. Attraction rather than promotion. He was waiting.
Yeah, and my Uncle John is like an amazing guy. And he said, listen, and he said, all right, well, sit down, shut your mouth. He read me the doctor's opinion. I learned about restlessness, irritability, and discontent. I learned about an entire psychic change. I learned about people drinking with impunity and how that made me
Hmm.
feel. I learned about that kind of stuff, and it really hit me. And he said, listen, you're going to learn to solve your drinking problem. That's going to be the easiest thing you do in this program. And I was like, dude, you have no idea. Like I'm an alcoholic. And he was like, yeah, the easiest thing that you're going to do is learn to stop drinking. But he said, but then slowly you're going to start to learn to solve your living problem. And that's really what this has turned into, is like this long journey of like trying to solve my living problem. And I don't know, I just kept coming, and it was over COVID, so it was over Zoom, and I just kept going like
Wow.
every single day
Wow.
and
Wow. I
just
mean, what was that?
expressing
I
like
mean,
I'm
what was it
expressing
like,
here.
Todd?
Like I don't give a fuck. I express
Yeah.
everything that is on me and in me and around me, and like it helps someone, and it obviously helps me like tremendously. But I got a sponsor, and people said, "I let me love you before you can, until you can love yourself." And I mean, I'm coming up on 4 years of sobriety. I mean, I met you like right in the
Wow.
beginning, and it is the most important thing I have ever done in my whole life. Like being sober and doing this with you is the most important thing I've ever done in my life. And now, like, my company was gone. Like, I'm in the humans gathering together in one place looking for exterior validation for an interior fucking, desire my whole life. And now I have nothing. I have no money and no nothing. But my team kept staying with me. You know what I mean? And I
Wow.
think it was too because I was like, yo, I'm going to change myself. And they're still with me, And like now we're 4 years later and we have like a little nerdy booking agency and like we're like doing this, And I'm still doing this. Sometimes I'm at AA, and sometimes I'm in AA,
Hmm.
And
Yep. I
both
can
are
relate to that.
okay. Yeah. And I really try and sort of focus more on like, what am I doing right? You know what I mean? And I don't know, like sometimes it's gnarly. I'm coming out of a gnarly week and sort of like gross, but even like doing this with you right now, like reminds me just how fucking grateful I am, you know? And like the things that we're doing, like musically and artistically and creatively right now, so vastly exceed any expectations I had in May of 2020. It's like it's overwhelmingly profound. You know what I mean? And that's the truth, but it's
Yeah.
only like it's my responsibility to either like embrace that and see that and receive that or not, like
Yep.
I'm never going to change the world, Joanne, but like I can change how I react to it.
Hmm.
And I don't know, I have so much to be thankful for today. you know? And people like you, like, I mean, we've met our one time in London, and
Yeah.
I know I'm gonna know you for the rest of my life, and I fucking
Yep.
know that you love me, you know?
Very much. Very much.
And you know that I love you. And like that's the thing, is like this fellowship. This is like really what it's all about. Is like we can do this together, and
Yeah.
we don't have to do it alone, you know? And it just makes our
And that's the biggest thing is like, that's what I looked for all those years. All those years, you know, we described as being like that punk kid who was just on their own in their bedroom, listening to records and reading fanzines and like fantasizing about being a part of something. And then going to clubs and trying to find the same, like looking in dark rooms, places, looking for love in all the wrong places. And then coming into recovery and finding it in a room for me, like finding love in a room full of junkies. You know what I mean? I was like
yeah,
so judgmental and so like, but these are my people, you are my people, you know, and
you're
like
my
having
people.
that overwhelming feeling of being at home is it's life beyond my wildest dreams. And it's
Yeah.
so interesting, isn't it, going back to your point about, you know, when people in your life were getting sober and you were just like, oh god, you know, you just think, ugh. You know, my experience was my old boss was in recovery when I worked at his management company. He was the managing director. And we were at parties and he wouldn't drink champagne. And I was like, come on, you're managing like some of the biggest pop acts in the world. Why are you not partying? And he'd like leave early. And I just couldn't get my head around it. I just thought that guy's really missing out on something. But actually, he was doing things like going and being of service. You know, he was taking meetings and he was out, you know, talking to sponsees and changing the world. And here's me, like, from my ivory tower of judgment saying, like, that guy doesn't even know what he's missing. Meanwhile, he'd been in the music industry for like, you know, he used to manage, you know, back in the day, Brian Eno and T-Rex. So like that's where he came from. And here's me, like this like 21-year-old kid, like he has no idea, you know, like I was doing it better. Like that terminal uniqueness that you talked about. Like it was so interesting. It's so interesting how, you know, and you said something this week in a meeting that we were in together, you know, the journey to authenticity.
Mm.
Um, Talk to me a bit more about that. What is that for you? I mean, you've just described something that's very a profound journey, but
Yeah,
how does that speak
it,
to
it
you?
I don't know if, because I'm really looking to sort of like understand who I actually am, you know, as like wacky as that sounds, like I don't really know who I am. I feel like my whole life has just been a sequence of like trying to fit myself into these things that like I thought were cool, or I thought you think were thought were cool, just to sort of like make me feel like I'm actually there. But like I realized too, looking back at it, how actually like inauthentic it actually was, you know? And you know, it's like purpose. Like I don't think I'm gonna get to like true authenticity. I don't think I'm gonna get to true purpose or any of these kind of things. But that's the trail I want to like be on nowadays, is like what do you actually feel? Like how do you feel? You know, what do you actually want? You know, and why? You know, and a lot of it comes down to like, you know, service, like, you know, and that's what is like starting to make me feel better about myself. How can I serve artists differently? How can I
Yes.
serve these tours differently? How can I serve these people that are working with me? You know, one thing I've never done in my whole life in at Outermost is like I've never said like this person works for me. I've never used that language once. And I do that because people never did that for me. Like I was like, yo, even though you're the boss, like, yo, we're doing this together, homie. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And when I can sort of make everyone feel, which I actually believe, that everyone's sort of like equal, like my people that work with me are like as equal as I am, you know, then all of a sudden it can sort of empower or spark this kind of light that is inside of everybody that just needs a fucking match, you know, to do something. And that's not like an egotistical thing. Like it's sort of like it's that wholesome sense of just like doing something more than yourself, you know? It's this
Yeah.
like
It's
journey to
unity.
humility. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's unity. And it's so interesting, isn't it? Because that is the point of what we do. And that's why I think for me, that's why 12 step fellowships are so anarchistic and revolutionary, because we are all equal in those spaces, regardless of all the outside stuff, you know, what you do for a job, where you come from, how little or how much you have. What we're interested in your problem is what we're interested in is your problem and how we can help. That's all we're
Yeah.
interested in. We're not interested in
Yeah.
any of that stuff. And for me, as someone who, before I came into recovery, I would do things like, we talked about at the top of this call, like I would go into meetings and I'd be sitting judging someone's shoes rather than hearing the message. I would be like, oh, those shoes are so ugly. So I was like going through times in my recovery before, we came into this realm of Zoom. Like I was going and sitting in meetings where you sat on the phone and listened in, because my disease was so othering of everything. I just couldn't hear the message. I wasn't allowing myself to connect and be at one. So, what you're describing there is unity. And it
Yeah,
goes back to all of the punk bands that we loved as kids. It was all about anarchy looks like self-love. Self-love is like the most radical thing you can do. It's the most radical, like, political act that you can commit. It really is. And
totally.
spreading that with others.
Yeah, I so identify with that. And people like you in this program are like, you are such a fucking inspiration. It's baffling. It's like impossible for me to even put like a word on it. Um, because when I came in here, I felt like such a loser. I felt like such a loser, Like, look at you, you dumb piece of shit, you fat fuck, dumb idiot, like you lost your bout with alcohol, But through the journey of like powerlessness and willingness and open-mindedness and acceptance, like our acceptance, at the end of the big book, you know what I mean? Which I think is one of the most important passages in all of the big book. Acceptance is the answer to all my problems, Now all of a sudden, like slowly, little by slow, that feeling like a loser has turned into this unbelievable sense of like empowerment and inspired kind of just celebration of having something that maybe not everybody has, and doing something with it, not for it, with it, you know
With
what I
it.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm never not going to be an alcoholic. Like I'm an alcoholic, like I process booze differently than other people do. My mind works differently. Like it's an obsession, it's a compulsion, it's a spiritual loss of values, full stop, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But how fucking lucky am I? How lucky am I through this whole program, through acceptance and surrender and all these things? Now, all of a sudden, um, that loser has turned into something so bright and so awesome and so like fucking empowered. It's just unbelievable. And I think that's why I keep coming to this shit,
Yeah.
because I'm like, yo, when I'm fucked up, life is fucked up. Life is lifey. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Totally
But the
lifey.
more that I come
Totally
back, the
lifey.
more I'm like, yo, like, I'm so lucky. You know what I mean?
We are the lucky ones. We are the lucky
Yeah.
ones. It's
And
incredible. It takes
too,
my breath away.
how many drug addicts do you know? How many alcoholics do you know? Like, I know a lot. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
a lot.
And
Yeah.
and now it's all of a sudden turned into like this different thing. Like when you and I were younger, like it was cool to like, get teared up and like go see shows and get fucked up and pass out and be like, what the hell happened? And there was kind of like a cool thing. And it's different. And maybe it's just that we're a little bit older now and stuff like that. But I don't know. There's kind of like this like people like revel and sort of celebrate this kind of like, let's be better as human beings during this really gnarly time that we're all experiencing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, and that's a very interesting point. I think how like recovery is revered in the industry is very different than it was when we were younger, for instance, and like people like Mark, who 12-step me, David E, who was in recovery for, when he passed, I think he was like 43 years clean or something. And he'd been in the industry for all that time, being like the lone person shouting about how you could be in recovery and be in this business. And now there's such a groundswell of people. It's just, and that's why it's so important, passenger recovery doing things like this is like, you can be it
Totally.
if you can see it. It's I'm very, very open about my recovery because Todd, more than anything, I need to be, because my addict will be like, oh, they don't know, so I can go on a tour and use, and nobody will know anything. It's like everyone needs to know. Like, and if that
Yeah.
helps one person to stand up and say, yeah, me too, great. But honestly, everyone needs to know, because my disease will hide it under a speck of dust if it can, like the tiniest speck. So it's like, it's so cunning. I need to be completely transparent. And it's just so great to hear, so many new artists that are asking for, on my side of the business in live touring, they're asking for crews that are sober. That's fantastic. That suggests that there's a real change happening. And we are a
There
part of that
is. And
change.
even at festivals, like you look at festivals and the stuff like what that Backline's doing and Hyam and Zach and stuff, and doing like backstage work that's like not all forward facing. It's like back dealing with like the art, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because it's a daily thing. This is, which is also a funny one to really actually accept, is like, this is a disease that needs to be treated daily, you know?
Daily. A daily reprieve. A daily reprieve.
Yeah, that's all
Yeah.
we got.
It has to be. And continue surrendering. It doesn't just happen. You just like go through your 12 steps and then like, you can go out and use again. I am not that kind of addict. I can't do that. I can never use again. Never ever use
Oh,
again. But addiction
dude.
just manifests itself in so many ways in my life. It's like changing seats on the Titanic all the time. I will forever be on the Titanic. It just depends my proximity to the water. Like,
Yeah,
and mine a lot of the time is, food and work. Those are two things where I'm
yeah.
constantly changing seats. So it's like,
Oh,
but being honest about that stuff, I'm being like, telling someone, I said, like, sponsorship is like literally saves my life. I'm still in awe that my sponsor doesn't send me an invoice in the post for the amount of help that she gives to me,
isn't
and
it
as she says, I
crazy?
keep what I have. Yeah, it's amazing. We're so blessed. We're so blessed. And she said, I keep what I have by giving to you. And this is me giving to you, and how she values her recovery so much that she's happy to talk to me on the phone about anything, anytime. Where else would you get that like golden ticket, essentially, to be
My
you?
sponsor
And
said
she
the
said,
same thing to me. He said,
yeah,
"Yo, this is
yeah.
way more for me than it is for you, just by the way." And I was like, "What is this macabre witchcraft you're talking about?" You know? Like, it was wild when I first heard
Yeah,
that, but yeah.
but it's true. It's true. So,
I keep
have you
coming.
got any kind
I
of
keep coming,
keep
Joanne.
coming back?
Yeah.
That's it. Keep coming back. What a great way to end this interview, as well as like, just keep coming back. Just keep coming back.
Yeah. It does get better.
It does get better. We are
Yeah.
evidence, and it's not always amazing. It's not always, fantastic, but it's, we learn to be able to manage and live through our feelings. That's what we
Yeah.
do here.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I don't know. I don't have any parting sort of like nuggets, but I'm really appreciative that we could do this, and, I don't know, one of the biggest fears that I had too, like, being in the music business, because I would drank so much at shows, like, I can't even imagine the thousands of shows that I've been at where I've been under the influence, and I was like, "Oh, man, I'm never gonna love music again." But I will say that today, as, like, coming up on 4 years of sobriety and working with this, like, little booking agency and stuff like that, I've never been more inspired and more, like, creative and open-minded and enthused about what today looks like than I ever have in my whole life, ever, you know? Yeah, it's wild.
Wow. That's the message.